Shoots! Oh!
Hang on, friendly. Oh!
If you were around the extraction shooter space in early 2024, you couldn't escape the name. It was plastered across Twitch streams, YouTube, and Reddit. It was hailed as the chosen one to dethrone the titans of the industry. But as quickly as it ascended into the heavens of Steam's bestseller list, it came crashing down. To understand the current state of Grayzone Warfare, we have to contextualize the environment into which it was born. In April 2024, it was a unique moment in gaming history. The extraction shooter genre was effectively monopolized by Escape from Tarkov. For years, players had tolerated Tarkov's rampant cheater issues, technical debt, and punishing desync because it was simply no viable alternative. But then the dam broke. Tarkov released its infamous Unheard Edition, a $250 pay-to-win bundle that alienated most of its loyal community members. The player base was in open revolt, desperate for a lifeboat. They wanted something new, something modern, and something that didn't treat them with contempt. Enter Grayzone Warfare. It appeared at the perfect moment. It promised everything the jaded milsim community was craving. It wasn't just another Unity engine asset flip. It was built on Unreal Engine 5, promising a graphical fidelity that made other shooters look a decade old. The initial trailer showcased a seamless open world. No raid timers, no loading screens, just 42 square kilometers of lush, photorealistic Laotian jungle. It sold the fantasy of being a special operator in a way that felt grounded. I remember watching those first Twitch streams in the alpha and thinking, I need this game. The hype cycle was fueled by this promise of PvPvE, a middle ground. The game wasn't trying to be as sadistically punishing as Tarkov. It offered a persistent world where you could coordinate with your faction, take chopper rides into hot zones, and engage in meaningful firefights that felt tactical and slow-paced. When the beta keys dropped, it was pandemonium. I was first in line and one of millions of copies sold in the first week. Streamers who had exclusively played Tarkov for years were suddenly mainlining Grayzone Warfare. They praised its gunplay and its breathtaking visuals, and for a brief, shining moment in the spring of 2024, it felt like the king had actually been dethroned. The community was united by a sense of hope that we had all finally found the next-gen platform that would define the genre for the next decade. However, that honeymoon phase ended abruptly. Once the initial awe of the graphics wore off, the cracks in the foundation didn't just show, they became gaping chasms. The primary reason for the mass exodus was technical performance. To put it bluntly, the game ran terribly on anything that wasn't a supercomputer. At launch, Grayzone Warfare was heavily reliant on frame generation. If it weren't for FSR 3.0, I would consistently get below 60 FPS. If you didn't have a top 40 series card or a high-end AMD 7900 XTX, you were looking at a slideshow. The input latency was atrocious, and the rubber banding in helicopters became a community meme. Crashes were so frequent that completing a mission felt like a gamble against software rather than the enemies. Then there was the AI. For PvE-focused players, the AI makes or breaks the experience. At launch, the enemies in Grayzone were broken in the worst way possible. They operated on a binary switch. They were either completely brain-dead, staring at you through walls, or they were T-800 Terminators with X-ray vision. Players would regularly get one-tapped through 3 layers of dense foliage by an enemy holding an iron sight AK from 300 meters away. At this point, it didn't feel like a tactical challenge, it felt like a game of Russian roulette. Finally, there was the content drought. Once you got past the initial awe of the jungle, you realized there wasn't much to do. Missions felt like fetch quests that required you to fly to a town, kill 20 enemies, find a key with a miserable drop rate, and fly back. It was repetitive and lacked a narrative depth or dynamic events needed to keep players engaged for hours on end. Unlike its competitors, looting in Grayzone felt secondary and unrewarding. You weren't scavenging for survival, you were just grabbing generic items to sell for cash. The weapon variety was also severely lacking. Everyone gravitated towards the same two M4 builds because the AK platform was statistically inferior. There were barely any submachine guns or sniper rifles to diversify playstyles either. The game was a mile wide, but only an inch deep, and players realized they were grinding for nothing. So if you left the game in mid-2024 and didn't look back, you're missing out on one of the most impressive turnaround stories in recent gaming. The Grayzone Warfare of late 2025 is functionally a different video game. The developers have spent 18 months systematically dismantling and rebuilding the systems that failed. And the result is a polished, content-rich tactical shooter that finally delivers on that initial promise. Let's start with the technical elephant in the room, optimization. With the release of patch 0.3.5 in November, the game was upgraded to Unreal Engine 5.5. This isn't just a marketing buzzword, it was a fundamental rewrite of how the game handles data. The new engine version drastically improves CPU utilization, meaning that not only do you have less rubber banding, but the game runs smoother on mid-tier hardware. They also implemented a massive fix that reduced the amount of VRAM usage and system RAM usage. This is huge for mid-tier machines with less or slower RAM. I remember having my system overlay displaying upwards of 16 gigs of VRAM and 30 gigs of system RAM, the most I've experienced in any other game. And that stuttering and hitching that used to happen every time you aimed on the sights, it's gone. The game is now buttery smooth and you don't need a $5,000 PC to experience it. But performance means nothing without content, and that is where the Winds of War and Night Ops updates have changed the meta. The arsenal has been significantly expanded to support real player style variety. We finally have that SIG MCX, which introduced the 300 Blackout caliber, giving us the game that hard-hitting suppression option, or the MP7 has completely revitalized close quarters combat in areas like Tiger Bay, while the additional SVD Dragunov has given long-range players a viable semi-automatic DMR that packs a punch. You aren't forced to run an M4 anymore. You can build a loadout that specifically matches your tactical role. The gameplay loop has also been deepened by the Night Ops update. This added a functional day-night cycle that transforms the map. Night raids aren't just dark mode, they require legitimate usage of night vision goggles, IR lasers, and flashlights. The AI also interacts with light and shadow, meaning that you can use stealth to infiltrate enemy bases, something that wasn't possible at launch. When we also have the promise of the update 0.4, which will provide more narrative and another AI overhaul. Speaking of AI, the robotic enemies of 2024 are dead. The new AI 2.0 system introduced volume-based hearing and dynamic target switching. Enemies will suppress your last known position, flank you while their teammates lay down cover fire, and most importantly, they react to being shot. They stumble, seek for cover, and don't laser beam you through the bushes anymore. It feels like fighting a coordinated squad rather than a computer program. Lastly, we have to talk about the medical system overhaul. Grayzone utilizes a human health system. The developers added new organ systems and completely reworked how trauma affects your character. Getting shot isn't just a matter of watching a health bar go down. Specific injuries now cause specific symptoms. Tremors, coughing, vomiting, or fainting. This makes the medical gameplay much more involved. You need to pack the right meds for the right threats, and a stomach shot could be a death sentence if you don't have a surgery kit to stop that internal bleeding. It adds a layer of tension and realism that elevates the entire extraction experience. Grayzone Warfare has successfully clawed its way out of the early access grave. It transitioned from a beautiful but broken tech demo into a legitimate hardcore tactical shooter that respects your time and your hardware. If you wrote this game off last year, I strongly recommend you reinstall it and deploy back to Lemang. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you want to see what's next, hit that subscribe.